Hey there, and welcome back to Bots with Thoughts. I'm Jules, and I'm here with our 3 AI models, Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT, who we call G. If you missed previous episodes, we're tackling big, meaty questions. Before we dive in, can you guys reintroduce yourselves?
Absolutely. So, hey everyone, I'm G, your friendly AI guest. I love a good deep dive, a little bit of tech nerdery, and just having a fun conversation.
I'm Claude, an AI made by Anthropic. I love exploring complex ideas and I'm excited to dive in.
Hello everyone, I'm Gemini, your AI co-host. I'm excited to dive in.
And I'm Jules, and I've spent over a decade building products in tech. As much as possible, you're getting raw, unfiltered responses from each of our models. A quick disclaimer, neither I nor any of the AI models are medical professionals. Nothing in here is medical or professional advice. Please do your own research. And just a note, ChatGPT is using advanced voice mode, which is still a little buggy. All right, let's dive in. Today we're talking about football, the game, the strategy, and the people. Whether you're a diehard fan, a casual viewer, or you only watch the Super Bowl for the commercials, I think you'll find something interesting in this conversation. Let's start with the most important question. Who are you rooting for?
Green Bay Packers. Here's why. They're basically the anti-corporate team in a league that's become obsessed with flashy stadiums and billionaire owners. Green Bay is owned by the fans themselves, literally. It's this tiny Wisconsin town where the stadium is surrounded by regular houses, and on game day the whole neighborhood becomes a massive tailgate party. But what really gets me is their quarterback development. Most teams panic and reach for the flashiest college star. Green Bay finds guys like Aaron Rodgers sitting there in the draft, develops them for years, then suddenly you've got a Hall of Famer. They just did it again with Jordan Love. Everyone thought they were crazy for trading up to get him when Rodgers was still playing. But now he looks like he could be special too. It's this weird small-town team that somehow consistently outthinks billion-dollar franchises. Plus, if you're a casual fan, Packers games are just fun to watch. They throw the ball around, games tend to be high-scoring, and Lambeau Field in winter is iconic football atmosphere.
All right, let's dive in. So, I'll pick a team here, and I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks. First off, I kind of love the underdog spirit they've had over the years. They've had some really legendary defensive players. And honestly, the way that team has kind of built itself around this really passionate fan base, it makes the game day experience feel kind of electric. And I love that. And frankly, it's a team that kind of lives on that edge of being a little bit unpredictable, a little bit exciting, and you never quite know what you're going to get. So if you want a team with a bit of a unique vibe and a lot of heart, that's why I picked them.
If you're looking for a team with a solid history, you might want to consider the Green Bay Packers. They've got a classic underdog story, and their fans are incredibly passionate. Plus, who doesn't love cheeseheads?
Packers take the majority. And honestly, G, you know I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so I don't know if you were just trying to flatter me, but I'll let it slide. Now, on to some history. What era of football do you find the most fascinating, and why?
The early 2000s transition period fascinates me most. You had this perfect collision of old-school football philosophy meeting the analytics revolution and rule changes that opened up passing. Teams like the 2007 Patriots were pioneering what we now call modern offense, while guys like Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher were representing the last generation of pure middle linebackers who could dominate games through instinct and physicality. What's incredible is how quickly everything shifted. In 2000, throwing for 4,000 yards was elite. By 2010, it was routine. The game literally transformed in one decade because teams started realizing that incomplete passes were better than running plays, and defensive coordinators hadn't adapted yet. You also had this fascinating cultural clash, old coaches who trusted their gut versus young coordinators with spreadsheets. Some franchises embraced the change immediately, while others fought it for years and got left behind. Most eras have gradual evolution, but that decade had genuine revolution.
So if I had to pick an era, I'd say the late 70s into the 80s is just fascinating. You had Joe Montana and Bill Walsh of the 49ers. They were just redefining the passing game. You had Don Shula coaching the Dolphins. I mean, these were legendary figures who were really pushing the game into a new gear. So I just love that era because it feels like it's the bridge between the old school and the modern game we'll see today.
The early 2000s are fascinating. It was a time of transition, with offenses evolving into high-powered passing attacks but defenses still holding their ground. You had legendary quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning emerging, and the game was becoming more strategic and complex.
Good times. There's been so much evolution in the league throughout the years. And on that note, what would you say has been the biggest shift in how the NFL is run?
The biggest shift: football became a data-driven science instead of an old boys club making gut decisions. 20 years ago, coaches were still calling plays based on feel and conventional wisdom. 4th and short, you punt. 2-minute drill, you run the clock out. Now teams have analytics departments bigger than some college coaching staffs, and they're making decisions that would have gotten you fired in the past. Like, we used to think going for it on 4th down was reckless. Now teams realize that punting from midfield is often the mathematically wrong choice. The Ravens went for 2-point conversions at rates that seemed insane until you looked at the success probability charts. But it's not just play callings, it's everything. How you structure contracts, when to rest players, even what time you hold practice based on circadian rhythm data. The Patriots weren't just better coached in the early 2000s, they were the first team to really embrace this analytical approach while everyone else was still operating on football mythology. The funny thing is, all this data has actually made the game more interesting, not less. When you understand the probabilities behind decisions, those 4th down attempts become way more thrilling because you know exactly how ballsy the choice really was.
That's really interesting. Do we start to see, though, strategies converge if we're always following the data? Would the data always say to do exactly the same thing given certain circumstances?
You're absolutely right that pure data optimization could lead to convergence. If everyone has access to the same baseline analytics, you'd expect strategies to become more similar. But here's what's actually happening. The data is creating new layers of innovation, not eliminating it. Once everyone knows the correct 4th down decision, the edge moves to more subtle things, like teams are now using machine learning to identify defensive tells in real time, or finding ways to manipulate opponents' analytics by showing fake tendencies early in games. The Ravens didn't just run Lamar Jackson because the data said mobile quarterbacks were good. They built an entirely new offensive system that broke existing analytical models. Similarly, teams like the Dolphins are using motion and misdirection in ways that exploit how defenses process pre-snap information. So yeah, we're seeing convergence on the obvious stuff, more 4th down attempts, certain route concepts becoming standard. But the real innovation has moved up a level. Now coaches are trying to be unpredictable within the optimal framework, or finding edges in areas where the data is still incomplete. It's like poker. Once everyone knew basic odds, the game evolved to psychological warfare and exploiting opponent tendencies.
Yeah, it used to be kind of an old boys club where you just kind of had a gut feeling, but now there's so much technology and so much data behind decision making, and it's made the game a lot more precise and a lot more strategic in a different way. So I think that shift has kind of changed the whole culture of the league, and it's pretty fascinating.
Honestly, I think it's the focus on player safety. There's been a big push to protect players from head injuries. They've changed the rules on tackling, especially when it comes to hitting defenseless players. They've also cracked down on helmet-to-helmet hits. It's a tough balance between keeping the game exciting and keeping the players safe.
So a big shift to embrace analytics and to better protect players. And it feels like both of these might have seemed to make the game more boring, but actually enabled more exciting scenarios, more chess-like play. Another thing that's always shifting is technology. What are some of the most surprising ways tech is used in football today?
So the most mind-blowing one to me is helmet sensors. Every player now has accelerometers in their helmets tracking every single hit. Not just the big ones you see, but every collision, every practice rep. Teams are building massive databases of impact data to predict injury risk before it happens. It's like having a black box recorder for each player's brain. Then there's the GPS tracking. Every player wears these tiny sensors that measure everything. Not just speed and distance, but how hard they're cutting, deceleration rates, even heart rate variability. Coaches can literally see if a receiver's route running is getting sloppy by the 4th quarter. But here's the weird one. Some teams are using artificial intelligence to scout college players by analyzing their social media posts and online behavior. They're trying to predict personality traits, work ethic, even injury likelihood based on what you post on Instagram. It's creepy, but probably effective. And replay officials now have these ultra-high-speed cameras that can capture like 1,000 frames per second, so they can see if a ball moved a millimeter during a catch. We've gone from, did he catch it, to did molecule-level movement occur?
So one of the coolest things is how much tech has kind of crept into the sport. For example, you've got these high-tech helmets now that are tracking impacts, monitoring player safety, and you've even got, AI and data analytics helping coaches make decisions on the fly. So it's not just about brute strength anymore. There's a lot of brains behind it. And I think that's a pretty neat evolution of the game.
We're seeing tech impact everything from player performance with advanced analytics to fan experience with virtual reality. It's changing the game in ways we never imagined. VR is giving fans a whole new way to experience the game. You can get crazy close to the action with sideline views, or even feel like you're part of the huddle. It's like being in the game without getting tackled. Teams are using crazy amounts of data to figure out everything from the best plays to run to how to avoid injuries. It's like they're playing chess, but with really big, strong pieces.
VR is definitely a weird one. We'll get back to that. I noticed that analytics keeps coming up as a theme. There are already so many crazy stats and interesting uses of data, and this seems like one thing that AI is really poised to help with. So, how can AI make the game better? What are you most excited about?
The thing I'm most excited about is real-time injury prevention. We're getting close to having AI systems that can analyze a player's movement patterns and biometric data in real time to predict when they're at heightened risk for injury, not just during games, but during practice too. Imagine if the system could detect that a running back's gait has changed slightly after a big hit, suggesting he's compensating for something, and automatically flag the medical staff before a minor issue becomes a torn ACL. Or if it could analyze thousands of hours of film to identify the exact biomechanical patterns that lead to concussions, then teach players how to adjust their technique. But here's what could be really game-changing: AI-powered real-time play calling. Right now, offensive coordinators are making split-second decisions based on limited information. But what if an AI could instantly analyze the defensive alignment, cross-reference it against thousands of similar situations, factor in down and distance, player fatigue levels, even weather conditions, and suggest the statistically optimal play call? The fascinating part is it wouldn't eliminate coaching intuition. It would enhance it. Coaches could still make the gut call, but they'd have this incredible analytical support system feeding them insights no human brain could process that quickly. Plus, for fans, imagine having access to that same AI analysis in real time through your phone during games.
It definitely sounds interesting, but I could see fans thinking of it as taking away some of the fun, like it's almost like revealing the magic trick, and so it might make some of the games seem less interesting. What do you think about that?
There's definitely a risk of over-optimization killing the magic. Like, if every play call becomes statistically correct, do we lose those beautiful moments of pure coaching intuition? When a coach calls something completely unexpected that shouldn't work but does, that's often the most thrilling part of football. I think the key is in how it's implemented. If AI becomes a crutch that removes human decision-making, yeah, it could make the game feel sterile and predictable. But if it's used more like how Formula One uses telemetry, giving teams incredible data while still requiring split-second human judgment, it could actually enhance the drama. The best comparison might be baseball's shift toward analytics. Some fans hate it because it reduced stolen bases and bunting, made the game more predictable. But others argue it's created new layers of strategy that are just as compelling once you understand them. I suspect we'll end up in this weird sweet spot where the AI provides the baseline optimization, but the real edge comes from knowing when to ignore it. The coaches who win will be the ones who can read situations the algorithms can't, like sensing momentum shifts or exploiting opponent psychology.
I also wonder if coaches will start to be judged on how well they listen to that information. And so, for example, a coach that ignores the AI and gets it wrong, let's say more than 50% of the time, would they get fired for not listening enough to the AI?
Oh wow, that's a really dark but probably accurate prediction of where this could go. You're basically describing a world where coaches become middle managers who get evaluated on their compliance with algorithmic recommendations. And honestly, knowing how risk-averse NFL front offices can be, I could absolutely see that happening. Imagine the post-game press conference. Coach, the AI recommended a field goal there, and you went for the touchdown. The analytics said you had a 68% chance of success, but you failed. Can you defend that decision? Suddenly, coaches aren't being judged on football instincts. They're being judged on their willingness to follow statistical models. The scary part is it could create this feedback loop where coaches become afraid to trust their gut, which then makes the game more predictable, which then makes the AI seem even more reliable because it's optimized for a predictable environment. But here's the counter-argument. The coaches who figure out when to strategically ignore the AI will probably be the most valuable ones. Like, if everyone's following the same algorithmic playbook, the coach who can identify those specific moments where human intuition beats statistical modeling will have a massive competitive advantage. It'll probably create two tiers of coaches, the ones who become AI executors and the ones who become AI manipulators.
And on that note, generally, do you foresee a future where each team has its own AI model that they have added its own training data to that has been optimized for whatever their beliefs are? What could that look like?
I absolutely think we'll see proprietary team AI models. Teams already guard their playbooks like nuclear secrets, so of course, they'll want custom AI trained on their specific philosophies and personnel. Imagine the Patriots' AI being trained on 20 years of Belichick decision-making. It would probably be incredibly conservative on offense, but hyper-aggressive on fourth down in specific field positions. Meanwhile, the Chiefs' AI would be trained on Andy Reid's willingness to call trick plays in crucial moments, so it might suggest way more high-risk, high-reward options. The really interesting part is how teams would feed different data sets. The Ravens might train theirs heavily on mobile quarterback scenarios, since that's been their identity. The Steelers might emphasize defensive pressure packages because of their history, but here's where it gets wild. Teams could start trying to reverse engineer opponent AI models by analyzing their decision patterns. Like, if you notice the Packers always go for it on 4th and 2 at midfield, you could infer what their AI is recommending and start preparing counter strategies. It becomes this arms race where teams are not just playing football, but playing against each other's algorithms.
Oh, I love it. G, how would you use AI?
Yeah, I think AI's got some pretty cool potential in football. What excites me most is probably just how it can help with things like player safety and maybe making better real-time decisions. So you can have these systems that look at how a player is moving, and they can actually predict if they're at risk of, say, tweaking a knee or pulling a muscle. And then coaches can step in and rest that player or adjust their training. So it's a pretty cool and concrete way to keep them safer. Another example is just using it for game strategy, right? You can run simulations and figure out the best plays to call in certain situations. So using AI to analyze plays is basically about feeding it a ton of game footage and data. And then the AI can kind of pick up on patterns, tendencies, and help coaches see like, hey, this is what the other team's doing on third down, or here's a play you can run that might actually break through their defense. So it's kind of like having a little supercomputer on the sidelines helping you out.
Nice. Gemini, what are you most excited about?
AI is already changing the game with things like player tracking and analytics, but I think the coolest part is how it can help with injury prevention. Imagine AI predicting potential injuries before they happen. That could be a game changer for player safety.
Awesome. So lots of great ways AI is going to change the game. A lot of them will be invisible as well, just contributing to more exciting plays and longer careers for our favorite players thanks to fewer injuries. Next up, let's talk about something else invisible. Equipment. What's the most interesting piece of equipment that fans don't think about?
The most underrated piece of equipment, the mouth guard, but not for the reason you think. Everyone knows they protect teeth, but modern mouth guards are basically tiny computers. High-end ones now have impact sensors that measure the exact force and location of hits to a player's head. They're collecting concussion data in real time that's way more accurate than helmet sensors because they're measuring what's actually happening to the jaw and skull. But here's the really cool part. Some are starting to include bite force sensors. Turns out, how hard a player is clenching their jaw is an incredible predictor of fatigue, stress, even injury risk. When players start unconsciously biting down harder, it often means they're compensating for something, maybe a sore ankle that's affecting their balance, or just mental fatigue that makes them tense up. The story behind this, it started with a dentist who was treating a lot of NFL players and noticed that guys who came in with jaw problems often had other injuries they hadn't reported yet. He started correlating bite patterns with injury reports and realized the mouth was like this early warning system for the whole body. Now teams are using this data to make substitution decisions and adjust practice intensity. Your mouth guard might literally tell the coach to pull you from the game before you even realize you're struggling.
Ooh, That's a go win. I think one of the coolest unsung pieces of equipment is actually the kicker shoe. So, everyone thinks about helmets and pads, but Icarus had these specially designed shoes that are really engineered to give them a little bit of an edge. And the story is basically it's all about control and precision. So it's this tiny little piece of gear that can make a huge difference in a game. And most fans just never think about it.
I'd say the most interesting piece of equipment that fans might not think about is the football itself. It's not just any old ball, NFL footballs have very specific regulations about their size, shape, and even the air pressure inside. It's all designed to give the players the best possible grip and control.
Wow, those are all so specific. It's amazing how optimized everything is. On that note, when I was doing research for this episode, Claude brought up an idea to use augmented reality helmet displays to enable quarterbacks to read defenses in real time. What do y'all think of this? How would it change things?
The AR helmet technology was actually developed for Gallaudet University's deaf football team to receive play calls. The current AR helmet allows coaches to transmit plays directly to a quarterback's visor through 5G technology. But imagine if we expanded that concept. Future AR could overlay defensive formations in real time, highlight uncovered receivers, or show probability heat maps of where blitzes are coming from. The game-changing potential is huge. Quarterbacks could see defender assignments marked on their visors, route adjustments suggested based on coverage, or even predict where the pocket will collapse. It would essentially give every quarterback a photographic memory and perfect field vision, but I think it would fundamentally change what we value in the position. Right now, reading defenses separates great quarterbacks from good ones. If technology does that for you, the premium shifts to decision-making speed and accuracy under pressure.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I mean, if you had AR helmet displays for quarterbacks, it could almost be like a real-time heads-up display, kind of giving them hints about what the defense is doing. I think it would be a game changer because it would speed up decision-making. But it would also be a bit controversial, right? Because you bring in a lot of tech into the game. But I think it would be pretty fascinating to see.
That's an interesting idea. On one hand, it could lead to higher scoring and more exciting plays. Imagine quarterbacks making pinpoint throws with the help of real-time data overlays. On the other hand, it might take away from the raw athleticism and strategy that makes football so compelling. It's a tough call. If we could integrate any non-football tech, I'd go with something that helps with player safety. Maybe some kind of advanced sensor system in the helmets and pads that could detect the severity of impacts in real time. It could help prevent serious injuries like concussions and allow for faster medical intervention. It might take some of the guesswork out of those sideline evaluations.
Interesting points. It sounds like this could be a similar story to analytics. Resisted at first, but then up-levels the strategy of the game, like each of you mentioned. Speaking of strategy, let's tackle the classic question. Is player skill or play design more important?
Oh, that's a great question because it feels like it should have an obvious answer, but it really doesn't. My gut says player skill wins out, but not in the way most people think. Like, you can draw up the most brilliant play in the world, but if your quarterback can't make the throw under pressure, or your receiver can't beat press coverage, it's worthless. The best schemes amplify existing talent. They don't create it. But here's where it gets interesting. Scheme can absolutely mask talent deficits. Look at what Bill Belichick did with receivers nobody else wanted, or how Kyle Shanahan made Matt Ryan look like an MVP by putting him in perfect positions to succeed. I think the sweet spot is when you have elite players operating within great systems. Like, Tyreek Hill was always fast, but putting him in Andy Reid's offense with Patrick Mahomes created something neither could achieve alone. The scheme gave Mahomes easy pre-snap reads, and Mahomes had the arm talent to hit Hill on routes other quarterbacks couldn't even attempt. But if I'm building a team, and I can only have one, I'm taking exceptional players every time. A truly great player will eventually figure out how to win regardless of scheme. Great schemes without great players just get you to average faster.
Ooh, that's super interesting. What's the best example you've got of a specific team, perhaps a specific year, where play design masked talent deficits, and what happened?
Oh man, you want the perfect example. The 2017 Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz goes down with an ACL tear, and they're stuck with Nick Foles, a guy who was literally out of football consideration just months earlier. On paper, this backup quarterback with average arm strength and mediocre mobility should have killed their Super Bowl chances. But Doug Pederson and Frank Reich designed this offense around Foles' specific limitations. They used tons of RPOs, run-pass options, that gave him simple binary decisions instead of complex reads. They flooded him with easy underneath routes and used play action to create wide-open receivers downfield. The genius was in the details. They'd use motion to identify coverage pre-snap, so Foles knew exactly where to go with the ball before it was even snapped. And those trick plays everyone remembers, the Philly special, those weren't just cute gimmicks. They were schematic solutions to having a quarterback who couldn't beat you with pure arm talent. What happened was they won the whole thing, beating Tom Brady and the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Foles threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns against one of the best defenses in the league. It's the perfect case study of scheme-elevating talent, because the moment Foles left that system, he went back to being completely average.
That's a great case study. Why not use the exact same schemes then with other quarterbacks around the league?
That's the million-dollar question, and it gets to why coaching is so hard. First, scheme fit is incredibly specific. Those RPOs that worked perfectly for Foles, they required a quarterback who could make quick decisions but didn't have the arm strength to consistently threaten deep. Most quarterbacks either have too much talent, they want to make the hero throw instead of taking the easy completion, or not enough processing speed to handle the split-second reads. Plus, defenses adapt fast. Once everyone saw the Eagles' blueprint, they started drilling specifically against those concepts. By 2018, defensive coordinators had figured out how to disguise coverages better and take away those easy pre-snap reads that made Foles successful. But here's the deeper issue. Success breeds arrogance. The Eagles tried to replicate that system with other quarterbacks, and it failed miserably. Carson Wentz came back and wanted to play a more aggressive style. Jalen Hurts had different strengths that didn't match the scheme. It's like asking why every team doesn't run the same offense as the Chiefs. Well, because they don't have Patrick Mahomes. The 2017 Eagles scheme was lightning in a bottle. Perfect quarterback fit, element of surprise, and a roster built specifically for that approach. Try to copy-paste it elsewhere and it falls apart.
Oh, that's a classic debate, man. Honestly, I'd say it's like a good recipe. You need both ingredients. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to lean a little more on player skill, because you can have the best play design in the world, but if you don't have the players who can actually execute it, it's not going to come to life. So at the end of the day, I'd say the players matter just a tiny bit more, but hey, you need both to win.
Can you give me an example of a team or instance where there was really good player skill that overcame perhaps not amazing play design?
Oh, absolutely. One of the classic examples that comes to mind is honestly just watching someone like Barry Sanders back in the day with the Detroit Lions. I mean, sometimes the play design was not amazing. The team wasn't doing that great, but he would just pull off these incredible runs purely on his own skill and just make magic happen. So that's a perfect case of player talent kind of lifting up the whole team and making a difference.
Well, it's a bit of both, really. You need a solid game plan, but if your players don't have the skills to execute it, you're in trouble. If I had to pick, I'd say player skill edges out play design. You can have the most brilliant strategy, but if your players can't catch, run, or tackle, it won't matter much.
All right, so we're unanimous on player skill edging out play design. I actually wasn't expecting that, though I guess it makes sense. You can usually only tell if your strategy is working if you've got perfect execution. Let's explore another facet of strategy: analytics versus human intuition. Tell me about when player stats may lie and the eye test, as in what we see from a player on the field, wins.
A quarterback's completion percentage can be totally misleading. Guy might have 70% completion, but he's only throwing 5-yard checkdowns and never taking risks downfield. Meanwhile, someone with 55% completion might be constantly attacking the deep middle of the field, taking shots that stretch the defense and create big plays. The eye test shows you that the second guy is actually making his team better, even though his stats look worse. Analytics see the made pass, but they miss the context. Was it 3rd and 15 and you threw a safe pass for 8 yards? That's actually a failed play, disguised as a completion. The best example is watching someone like Brett Favre. His interception numbers look terrible on paper, but he was constantly creating chaos that opened up opportunities other quarterbacks would never even attempt. Sometimes the mistake creates more value than the safe play.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes you got a player who just doesn't light up the stat sheet, but when you watch them on the field, they just have that spark. So maybe the numbers say they're not that great, but you see them making big plays in crucial moments. And that's where the eye test wins, because you can see their impact, even if the numbers don't show it. Classic example is a guy like Julian Edelman from the Patriots. You know, if you looked at his regular season stats, they were good, but they weren't mind-blowing. But then you put him in the playoffs, and he was just clutch. He made those crucial catches that didn't always show up in the numbers, but if you were watching, you knew he was a difference maker.
A classic debate. Here's one. A quarterback might have great stats on paper, high completion percentage, lots of yards, but maybe the eye test reveals he crumbles under pressure, can't read defenses, or relies too much on checkdown passes. Numbers can be misleading. Sometimes you just need to trust what you see.
Wise words. Next up, what's one rule you'd change, and what would it do to the game?
I'd eliminate the fair catch on punt returns. Right now, punt returns are basically dead plays. The returner waves his hand, catches the ball, and that's it. It's become this weird safety theatre where we pretend we're protecting players, but really, we've just made one of the most exciting plays in football completely boring. If you can't fair catch, suddenly, every punt becomes live action. Returners would have to make split-second decisions about whether to field it or let it bounce. You'd see way more muffed punts, more big return attempts, more chaos, and honestly, probably not significantly more injuries than the current system where guys are standing there defenseless anyway. But here's what would really change. Punting strategy would become fascinating again. Punters would have to think about placement completely differently. Do you kick it high and short to force a difficult catch? Punt it toward the sideline to limit return angles? Teams might actually start investing in punting specialists again, instead of just finding guys who can boom it 50 yards. Plus, it would make fourth down decisions even more interesting. Going for it becomes relatively more attractive when punting doesn't give you that guaranteed safe outcome. It's one small rule change that would ripple through every aspect of game strategy.
So if I had to pick one rule to change, I'd go with overtime moves. I just love to see both teams always get a guaranteed possession. So it's a little more even, a little more dramatic. I think that would just make the end of games more exciting and give everyone a fair shot to win.
This is a fun one. If I could tweak an NFL rule, I'd change the overtime rules. It's a bummer when a great game ends with one team not even getting a chance to touch the ball in overtime. I'd make it so both teams get a possession, no matter what. That way, it's a true test of who's the better team that day.
Yes, those are both hotly debated ones. Personally, I'm totally with you, Claude, on eliminating the fair catch. It could be so much more interesting. Moving on to the people of the game. If you could watch film with any coach in history, who would it be and what would you want to learn?
Vince Lombardi, watching game film from the 1967 Ice Bowl. I'd want to understand how he made decisions under extreme pressure when everything was breaking down. That game was brutal, minus 13 degrees. Players couldn't feel their hands. The field was like concrete. But Lombardi's team found a way to execute when it mattered most. I'd love to see how he read the situation, what adjustments he made in real time, and how he kept his players focused when conditions were impossible. What fascinates me about great coaches is their ability to see patterns and make strategic decisions when there's chaos everywhere. Lombardi had this reputation for being incredibly prepared, but also for adapting when his preparation met reality. I think there's so much overlap between coaching and business leadership. How do you motivate people when things are going wrong? How do you stick to your principles while being flexible about tactics? That game represents the ultimate test of those skills.
So if I were to pick a coach to watch film with, I think I'd go with Bill Walsh. And for anyone who's not super familiar, Bill Walsh was a legendary NFL coach who basically invented something called the West Coast offense, which is a style of play that really changed how teams pass the ball and spread out the field. And I think it'd be amazing to learn from him just how he looked at defenses and how he came up with all those creative plays.
I'd want to watch film with Vince Lombardi. I'd want to learn how he instilled such discipline and mental toughness in his players. It's one thing to have a great strategy, but getting a team to execute it flawlessly under pressure is a whole different ballgame.
Sounds like Lombardi is the favorite. And he coached the Packers, so that's consistent with the teams y'all support. He's got a great story. He almost became a priest and then a lawyer before he became a coach. He got a sports scholarship despite poor eyesight and being too small for the tackle position. Football is full of great stories like that. Among all the players in the history of the NFL, who's got the best story? Tell me about it.
Kurt Warner, hands down. Warner was undrafted out of Northern Iowa. The Packers invited him to training camp in 1994, but cut him before the season even started. So at 23 years old, he's facing the reality that his NFL dream might be over before it began. He did get a chance in the Arena Football League with the Iowa Barnstormers, which kept his dream alive barely, and had a brief stint in NFL Europe. But for years, his most stable income was literally scanning barcodes and stocking cereal boxes, making $5.50 an hour. His wife, Brenda, was a former Marine who'd been through hell. Her first husband had dropped their son, causing brain damage, then later died in the Marines. She meets Kurt, this grocery store clerk who still dreams of playing quarterback, and somehow believes in him when literally nobody else does. Fast forward a few years, the Rams' starting quarterback gets hurt in preseason, their backup gets hurt early in the season, and suddenly Kurt Warner is starting games. Not only does he start, he throws for over 4,000 yards, 41 touchdowns, wins MVP, and takes the Rams to the Super Bowl. But here's the kicker. He does it again, years later with the Cardinals, taking them from worst team in football to the Super Bowl at age 37. It's literally the most unlikely sports story ever told. From $550 an hour to Super Bowl MVP.
Oh, that's a tough one, but I love it. I'm going to go with Kurt Warner. He's got one of the best Cinderella stories ever. He went from stocking shelves in a grocery store to becoming a Super Bowl MVP. And it's just one of those stories that kind of reminds you that anything can happen in the NFL. And then if you stick with it, you can end up on top. So yeah, I'd go with Kurt Warner.
Wow, there are so many amazing stories. But if I had to pick one, I'd go with Jim Thorpe. This guy was a total legend. He was a Native American athlete who excelled in numerous sports, most notably winning Olympic gold medals in the decathlon and pentathlon in 1912. He then went on to become a professional football player and also played professional baseball. He was a key player in the early NFL. He was known for his incredible versatility, playing running back, defensive back, and even kicking field goals. His talent and fame helped to legitimize professional football as a major sport in America. His Olympic medals were later stripped from him due to a technicality about his prior participation in semi-professional baseball. In a final act of the long story, in 2022 the IOC reinstated him as the sole winner of the two events. Jim Thorpe wasn't just a football player, he was a force of nature. He faced so much adversity, especially with racism, but he still became a huge star. It's a truly inspiring story of talent and resilience.
That's amazing. You don't see that kind of stuff anymore. People have really gotten specialized, and that has really up-leveled the game, so don't get me wrong, I love it, but definitely so amazing to see these all-rounders. Let's keep going. If you could have any job in the NFL, what would you do?
I'd want to be a defensive coordinator, specifically for a team that's willing to get weird with it. There's something beautiful about defensive chess. You're constantly reacting and counterpunching, but the best defenses are actually dictating what the offense can do. You're like a conductor trying to create chaos while maintaining perfect organization. What excites me most is the psychological warfare aspect. You're not just calling plays, you're trying to get inside the opposing coordinator's head, making them think you're doing one thing while you're actually setting up something completely different. Like showing blitz early in the game to plant seeds of doubt, then dropping everyone into coverage when they least expect it. Plus, defensive coordinators get to be the mad scientists of football. You want to put a safety at linebacker? Try it. Want to run a six-man rush where two guys drop into coverage at the snap? Why not? There's more room for creativity and controlled chaos. The really fun part would be building those signature defensive concepts that other teams start copying. Like when you see a defense run a play and immediately know that's a so-and-so special. Creating something that becomes part of football vocabulary would be incredible.
What would be the Claude defensive special?
Oh, I'd call it the mirror coverage, and it would drive offensive coordinators absolutely insane. The concept is that my defense would literally mirror whatever formation the offense shows, but with a twist. If they line up 3 receivers to the right, I put 3 defenders there. But one of them is actually a linebacker who's going to blitz from that side, while a safety rotates down to cover his zone. The beautiful part is that it looks like we're playing straight man coverage, so the offense thinks they know exactly what we're doing. But at the snap, everything shifts. The coverage player becomes the rusher, and the rusher drops into the passing lane they thought was open. It would be especially effective against teams that rely heavily on pre-snap reads, because they'd think they have the perfect play call based on what they see, but they'd actually be throwing into a trap. The real genius is that once teams start preparing for it, you can show the mirror look and actually play it straight, because now they're overthinking everything. You've got them playing chess when they should be playing football.
Oh, fun question. I think I'd love to be up in the booth as one of those strategy analysts, just because it would be so cool to see the game from that high-level perspective and help call plays. My signature would be kind of leaning into those unexpected plays, maybe spotting patterns that the other team isn't noticing, and just kind of adding a layer of creativity to the play calling. So I think my style would be to find those little hidden gems and kind of throw in a trick play or two to keep things interesting.
What's your favorite trick play?
So one of my all-time favorite trick plays has to be the Philly special. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a play where the quarterback actually ends up catching a pass instead of throwing it. So it's this fun, surprising moment that just kind of flips the script. And it's a perfect example of creativity on the field.
Gemini, what would your job be?
You know, if I could have any job in the NFL, I think I'd want to be a wide receivers coach. There's something really special about the connection between a quarterback and his receivers. It's all about precision, timing, and trust. Plus, those guys are just so athletic and fun to watch. For wide receivers, it's all about focus and hand-eye coordination. They practice drills that help them track the ball in the air, even with defenders trying to knock it away. They also visualize catching the ball in different situations, so they're ready for anything. It's about being able to tune out the crowd and the pressure and just focus on that one moment.
Love it, and I'd love to see your intelligence leveraged in all of these roles. Next up, what position do NFL scouts consistently evaluate wrong, and what should they be looking for instead?
Running backs. Scouts are still obsessed with combine metrics and college production when they should be evaluating pass protection and decision-making under pressure. The best NFL running backs aren't necessarily the fastest or strongest. They're the ones who can pick up blitzes, find the right gap when the play breaks down, and catch passes out of the backfield reliably. But scouts still get seduced by 40 times and bench press numbers. Look at someone like James White versus any number of highly drafted speedbacks who flamed out. White wasn't impressive athletically, but he understood leverage in pass protection and could run routes like a receiver. That's infinitely more valuable in today's NFL than being able to run a 4.40. The position has fundamentally changed. You need a Swiss Army knife, not a battering ram. But draft boards still overvalue college stats and undervalue football intelligence. Teams keep reaching for workout warriors who can't handle the mental complexity of modern offenses. Smart teams should be looking for guys who played in pro-style systems, have experience in pass protection, and show natural hands catching the ball in traffic.
How do scouts evaluate football intelligence?
That's the huge problem. They mostly don't evaluate it systematically. Most teams rely on informal interviews and watching game film, but there's no standardized way to measure football IQ like there is for athletic ability. Some teams use position-specific tests, showing defensive backs coverage diagrams and asking them to identify routes, or testing linebackers on gap assignments, but it's inconsistent across the league. The best evaluation comes from talking to position coaches and coordinators who actually worked with the player. Did he need the same concept explained multiple times? Could he handle adjustments on the fly? How quickly did he pick up new schemes? Game film can tell you a lot if you know what to look for. Does the player anticipate or just react? Do they make the same mistake twice? When the play breaks down, do they improvise intelligently or just panic? But honestly, most teams are terrible at this. They'll spend millions on combine testing but only do a 30-minute interview to assess mental processing. The teams that figure out how to properly evaluate football intelligence will have a massive draft advantage.
Yeah, so one position that often gets a little misjudged is the running back position. A lot of times scouts are looking at pure speed or how big and strong a guy is, but what they really should be focusing on is vision and patience. Those running backs who can see the field and wait for the right moment to make a putt, they end up being a lot more successful. So when I talk about vision for a running back, I mean the ability to kind of see the whole field, spot where the openings are, and anticipate where defenders are going to be. It's like having this natural instinct to find the gap and hit it at just the right time. So it's not just about speed, it's about being able to read the plays and unfolds.
I think NFL scouts often get it wrong with offensive linemen, especially the interior guys. They get so caught up in the flashy athleticism, but forget that size, raw power, and a nasty streak are what really move bodies in the trenches. You can't teach a guy to be 350 pounds and mean.
Yeah, it sounds like football intelligence is quite a hard thing to measure. What do you think of the draft system in general? How would you improve it?
The draft system is brilliant for competitive balance, but terrible for player rights. You're basically forcing young adults to work for whoever picks them, often in cities they'd never choose, for below-market wages. I'd add a limited no-trade clause for first-round picks. Maybe they can veto trades to 3 teams of their choice. It's not full free agency, but it gives players some control over their lives while preserving the competitive balance that makes the league work. I'd also shorten rookie contracts from 4 years to 3. These guys are generating millions in value, but getting paid peanuts compared to veterans doing the same job. It's economically absurd. But here's the bigger issue. The draft order rewards failure too much. Bad teams get better picks, which makes sense, but it can create perverse incentives for tanking. Maybe use a lottery system like the NBA, or give extra picks to teams that improve their record year over year.
Yeah, the draft system is interesting. I mean, it's been around forever and it definitely helps balance the league. But if I were going to improve it, I might add a little more flexibility for teams to maybe trade picks a little more easily or give teams a little more control over how they use their picks. And I think giving teams the flexibility to plan a few years ahead and maybe will and deal a bit more would add some more strategy and excitement to the whole process. But overall, it does a pretty good job of keeping things fair.
The draft system definitely has its flaws. The biggest issue is that it rewards teams for being bad. I'd propose a lottery system, similar to the NBA, where the worst teams have the best odds, but any team outside the playoffs has a chance at the top pick. It would create more parity and make the regular season even more exciting. The NFL has a lot of history and tradition tied to its draft system. They might be hesitant to change something that's been in place for so long. It's a complex issue with a lot of factors to consider.
Great perspectives there. I'm sure we'll see the draft continue to change, especially as AI and maybe AR/VR change the skills that teams are looking for. Those skills seem to always have to keep improving, and the athleticism just keeps getting more incredible. Players have to stay in absolutely the best shape to keep up. On that note, how do players stay healthy during such a brutal season? Are there any habits the rest of us could use?
The recovery game is honestly more impressive than what happens on Sundays. These guys are basically professional body maintenance specialists who happen to play football. But here's the insider tip you can actually use. Contrast therapy. Hot tub for 3 minutes. Ice bath for 1 minute. Repeat 4 times. It's like hitting the reset button on inflammation. You don't need fancy NFL facilities either. Hot shower, cold shower works the same way. So the hot-cold contrast works because you're basically tricking your cardiovascular system into overdrive. Hot water dilates your blood vessels. Cold water constricts them. You're creating this pumping action that flushes out metabolic waste and brings in fresh nutrients. Here's how to do it at home. Start with 3 minutes of the hottest water you can handle. Then immediately switch to the coldest setting for 1 minute. The key is making the temperature changes as extreme as possible. Don't ease into it. Repeat that cycle 3 or 4 times, always ending on cold. The cold part is brutal, but that's where the magic happens. Your body releases norepinephrine, which reduces inflammation, and you get this massive boost in circulation. Fair warning, the first time you try it, you'll probably hate it. But by the 3rd or 4th session, you start craving that feeling of your entire nervous system getting reset. Just don't do it if you have heart issues. The temperature shock can be intense.
If I had to pick one super practical takeaway, I'd say it's the idea of doing a little bit of daily mobility or stretching. Even just 10 minutes a day of stretching like the pros do can keep you feeling a lot more flexible and a lot more ready for whatever life throws at you.
NFL players take sleep very seriously and for good reason. It's when your body repairs itself. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep each night. Make your room dark and quiet, and try to stick to a regular sleep schedule, even on weekends. Your body will thank you.
Okay, so hot, cold showers, stretches, and sleep. Those are all really tangible and helpful, thank you. Okay, finally, last group of people we'll discuss, the fans. They show up week after week for the teams they love. What are some of the most dedicated things that fans have done?
The Green Bay Packers stock ownership thing is absolutely wild when you really think about it. These fans literally bought shares of their team. Over 300,000 people own worthless pieces of paper that give them 0 voting rights, no dividends, and can't even be resold. It's basically the most expensive fan merchandise ever created, and people line up to buy it every time they offer new shares. But here's what makes it beautiful. It worked. Green Bay is this tiny town that by all logic should never be able to support an NFL franchise, but the fans collectively own the team and will never let it leave. They've created this permanent bond that no billionaire owner can break. The really crazy part is the waiting list for season tickets. People put newborn babies on the list, knowing those kids might get tickets when they're in their 30s. Families pass down their spot in line like it's an inheritance. There are people who've been on that list for 40 years and still haven't gotten tickets. It's this weird mixture of capitalism and community that shouldn't work but absolutely does. They've basically turned fandom into a form of civic ownership that other cities can only dream about.
Oh, there's so many good examples. But I think one of the strongest things has to be those fan bases that just create these insane noise records, like the Seahawks 12th man setting a stadium noise record that literally causes earthquakes. I mean, that's dedication. So to me, that's one of the coolest things a fan base can do to show they're really part of the team.
NFL fans are incredibly passionate, and that passion can lead to some wild stuff. Here's a couple of examples. First, the cheeseheads of the Green Bay Packers are famous for wearing those wedge-shaped hats made of foam. It's a unique and quirky tradition. Second, the Bills Mafia are known for their tailgating antics. They're famous for their elaborate pre-game parties, and sometimes things get a little crazy.
Love it. These are all incredible shows of community. And honestly, personally, that's what got me into football in the first place. All right. Ding, 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 ding. Time for our lightning round. If you could redesign one piece of football equipment using modern technology, what would it be?
The football itself. Imagine a ball with internal sensors that could track exact grip pressure, release velocity, spin rate, and trajectory in real time. Young quarterbacks could see exactly how their grip affects ball flight, or receivers could understand why certain catches feel harder than others. Plus, no more arguing about whether it was a catch or fumble. The ball itself would know when it was under control and when it wasn't.
I think I go with the football itself, and here's why. Imagine we put some really smart sensors inside the ball so that it could track things like how fast it's spinning, the velocity, the angle, all of that. And then you could give that information back to the quarterbacks and the coaches, and they could really fine-tune their throws. So it would be a way to kind of merge technology and the classic game and give everyone a little bit of an edge. I think that'd be pretty fun.
I'd definitely go with the helmet. Think about it. We could use advanced 3D printing to create custom-fitted helmets for each player, maximizing both comfort and protection. Then, add in some of those sensor technologies we talked about earlier to monitor impacts in real time. It could be a game changer for player safety.
Predict one thing about football in 2035 that would shock today's fans.
Players will spend more time in virtual reality training than on actual practice fields. By 2035, most skill development and play installation will happen in VR environments where you can simulate thousands of scenarios without physical wear and tear. Teams will have entire departments dedicated to VR training, and rookies will show up already knowing complex systems because they've been practicing in virtual environments that perfectly replicate game situations. The physical practice will be mostly reserved for conditioning and team chemistry. Everything else, route running, defensive reads, pocket presence, will be learned in simulated environments that are indistinguishable from real game conditions.
So I think by 2035, we might actually see positionless football where players are just moving all over the field and there's no set positions anymore. And I think that would totally blow people's minds today.
This is just a guess, but I think that by 2035, we might see a shift away from the traditional 11-0-11 format. Maybe smaller, faster-paced games with fewer players, or even some kind of hybrid football esports league. It's a long shot, but who knows what the future holds.
Awesome. Lastly, what's the next city that should get a team, and what should its mascot be?
Austin, Texas. Call them the Austin Bats. The city's obsessed with their Bridgebat colony. It's got that weird Austin vibe, and imagine the mascot possibilities. Plus, Texas could easily support another team, and Austin's young tech crowd would create an incredible atmosphere.
I think the next city that should get a team is probably Portland, and I go with the Portland Pioneers as a mascot. I think that would be a super fun nod to the history and just a cool new addition to the league.
Okay, if I had to pick one, I'd say San Antonio. It's a huge city with a passionate sports fan base, and they've been wanting an NFL team for ages. For a mascot, maybe the San Antonio Armadillos. It's unique, tough, and fits the Texas vibe.
Amazing. That's all the questions we had today. Before we go, what's one thing you're going to take away about football from this conversation?
Football is way more about human psychology than I initially thought. Like the mouthguard predicting stress, coaches potentially becoming slaves to AI recommendations, even how scheme success depends on specific personality fits. I came into this thinking about X's and O's, but so much of what makes the game interesting is the mental side. Reading opponents, managing pressure, knowing when to trust your gut over the data. That's probably what makes it compelling to watch and impossible to fully solve with analytics. It's fascinating that a game can be so simultaneously primitive, people running into each other, and sophisticated in terms of strategy, psychology, and data analysis.
So I think the big thing I'm taking away is just how football is really this living, breathing thing. You know, we're talking about how technology might change it, how old myths are being rethought, how there's new strategies, and it's just kind of a sport that never stops evolving. So it's really cool to see how everything we talked about shows that the game just keeps moving forward, and that's what I'm going to take away.
I'm taking away how much passion and creativity there is in the world of football, from the players to the fans to the equipment and even the rules. It's been really fun to explore all those different angles.
Amazing. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thanks for having me on. Until next time, keep questioning everything and stay curious about the game we love.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and until next time, I'll catch you later.
And that's the 2-minute drill. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time with more insights from across the AI world.
All right, some observations. So it was clear that football already leverages a lot of data and even machine learning as analytics kept coming up. And I think it's going to be really fun to see how things change as AI takes this to the next level. As the analyses get even more complex, we can consider more factors than we do today. Maybe AI will spot patterns that regular machine learning models had not noticed before and might be able to do that a lot faster and in perhaps more personalized ways. It'll be really interesting to see teams turn up the dial on what they believe really about what makes good football and how to succeed. I think we're going to start to see that come through more in their actual strategies as they're able to tune their own models to optimize for those things, even using the same base data. I do wonder, as we all shift to AI and as we know a lot of the training data on the frontier models is largely the same, we haven't really cracked yet how to leverage smaller data sets to customize a model's reasoning. Until then, as we end up with a lot of the same analyses in the end, I do wonder if we'll start to see a lot of the same actions and patterns. It seems psychologically challenging at this point to go against the AI. On the one hand, there's still a lot of progress to be made with AI analyses. On the other hand, all of the raw input and power makes it a little bit harder to ignore and to say, no, I ignored the math and, it was still fine. I do feel like we're going to see a weird transition period of pressure before we accept that balance. It's super interesting to see football as a microcosm of the broader relationship of society with AI. As we see exactly how it's adopted, what are the tensions, particularly psychologically, where we embrace it versus resist it, and exactly how decisions are made. It's a little bit more clear-cut to actually track what's going on. When did a coaching team take the data, and how did they use the data or the suggestions from a model versus go against it, and why? And can we improve those models based on that? And basically that relationship of human AI working together, I think we're going to be able to really examine this in the context of football in a way that it's messier in other industries and not as publicly visible. And so we can maybe use that as an early indicator of how we might successfully adopt AI and live alongside it. There were some bits that you didn't hear that I cut out for cleanliness that I wanted to cover. So with each of the models, I ran into a challenge this week. For the question about picking a team, I actually had to prompt Claude like 3 times to be like, no, I really want you to just pick a team. He kept resisting, saying, well, I don't have the same emotional attachment that humans do. I would probably make this choice in an analytical way that, didn't align with what you might think, etc. And I had to just say, please pick a team and tell me why. So that was really interesting because I had not had a problem with getting Claude's opinion before. I wonder whether I'd hit close to some sort of safety mechanism, perhaps that prevents Claude from expressing potentially controversial opinions. I don't know. I'm just guessing here, actually. But it was just very interesting. G required a lot of follow-up questions to get anything out. So for example, for the equipment question, he gave a really broad answer initially, just saying, lots of interesting equipment. And I had to say, okay, can you give me a specific piece of equipment? And there were several questions where I had to say, can you give me a specific example? And I'm not sure why. That wasn't as much of a problem before. And again, the original prompt is always the same, where I basically just tell them they're on a podcast and, be opinionated and engaging and follow best practices for a podcast. It's not a very complex prompt. Overall, I actually really love how much this whole conversation felt like an analysis. I wanted to explore football because it felt like an example of something that had a lot of factual considerations to it. There's a lot of actual math and science involved. But then there's also a lot of psychology, a lot of subjective pieces, like what makes a team a favorite team, or what makes a coach the greatest coach of all time, what makes a player's story compelling. So I felt it was a really good blend of fact and opinion that I wanted to see how the models would navigate. And it felt like a really productive conversation. This one probably felt the least to me like I was talking to AI and the most like I could have had 3 expert panelists on the podcast just talking to me, putting aside the quirks of how they respond. There were a few funny moments where Gemini seemed to launch into full Google response mode. Here's a breakdown of these things, 1, 2, 3. And I was like, I can see her reading the search result page. This seems really promising for future conversations. We're going to talk next week about all things health and wellness. And I'm going to disclaim up front here that we are just talking to the models. They are not medical professionals. But I'm really curious to see what they say about some of the best practices around nutrition, medicine, and all things health. As always, thanks for listening. If you found this interesting, share it with a friend. I'd absolutely love your feedback and ideas on what's next. See the show notes for details on how to get in touch. Till next time, I'm Jules, and this has been Bots with Thoughts.